When asked what keeps you awake at night, our current Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, responded that for every senior leader, it is the thought of a terrorist ending up with a weapon of mass destruction. Today, we live in a time of increasing nuclear peril. The number of states armed with nuclear weapons or seeking to acquire them is augmenting, and terrorist organizations worldwide have made it clear that they intend to acquire nuclear weapons or the material, technology, and expertise needed to build them.
The real threat now is not from states that understand that you cannot use these weapons without inviting suicidal response, but terrorists who do not care about suicidal response, terrorists who are prepared to commit suicide themselves.
Nuclear terrorism, where is the threat greatest? I would say that if you're thinking about nuclear materials, that Russia is still our greatest threat. Not because the Russian government would give these materials to terrorists, but because there is so much materials that still need to be protected. And obviously we've been working on this through the G8, we've been working on this through a number of different international organizations, but that threat is still the largest.
On October 28, 2008, Dr. Mohammed El-Baradi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, stood in front of the United Nations General Assembly and warned the world about nuclear terror. He stated that the possibility of terrorists obtaining nuclear or other radioactive material remains a grave threat. The number of incidents reported to the IAEA involving the theft or loss of nuclear radioactive material is disturbingly high.
There's a great deal of unsecured radioactive material around the planet, including highly enriched uranium and plutonium that are used for nuclear weapons, that I believe is vulnerable to being acquired one way or another by non-state actors, as they're called, who could be terrorists or they could be black market people or whatever. I think that's a much more likely scenario than acquiring a weapon.
So if the problem lies with securing fissile material such as highly enriched uranium and plutonium fuel rods used to make nuclear weapons, the important question is where the U.S. needs to focus its efforts in securing this material. At what places around the world is the nuclear material most vulnerable and least protected?
Calling the rising tide of Taliban violence in Pakistan cause for grave concern, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs played down the nightmare scenario of terrorists taking control of that country's nuclear weapons.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't see that in any way imminent whatsoever at this particular point in time.
But Admiral Mullen acknowledged there's a limit to what he knows, since Pakistan guards its doomsday secrets as jealously as the U.S. guards its own.
No question, in my mind, the greatest problem that I'm concerned about is Pakistan. Pakistan has, we don't really know, or at least certainly not public knowledge, how many nuclear weapons Pakistan has. We know that they have an extensive nuclear infrastructure that includes not just the bombs or warheads, but the materials used to make them. And Pakistan is probably the most unstable nation in Central Asia or South Asia. I don't know how many changes in government they've had and assassinations and military coups since they were first independent in 1947, but plenty. We know from the news these days that Pakistan is home to a whole variety of extremist groups who certainly are not friendly with the United States. It's not a great leap of faith for me to think that one of them would be motivated sufficiently and have enough inside information to be able to seize a nuclear facility in Pakistan or nuclear materials or a bomb itself. I frankly won't be surprised if one morning I wake up and read that headline on the front page of the paper that somebody has commandeered something in Pakistan.
President Obama stated in Prague in 2009 that the existence of thousands of nuclear weapons is the most dangerous legacy of the Cold War. But the Cold War is over, and these weapons are still sitting both deployed and reserved all across the world. The key question we must answer is how to counter this threat, the threat of nuclear terrorism.
I believe if you're trying to deter nuclear terrorism, you both have to work to try to deter terrorism, and you need to work to try to secure nuclear materials. There are two sides to the coin, and you can't ignore either of them. Now, one of the programs that was created in the last administration, under the Bush administration, the PSI, Proliferation Security Initiative, that is one where you're really trying to intercede, to interdict nuclear materials when you have intelligence that they are being moved, when you have intelligence that they might be being sold through black markets to the highest bidder. And I think that that program is very useful when you're thinking about the nuclear terrorist route. And that is one that is done through the State Department, but with the cooperation of 66 other countries.
It's equally important to place our priority on detecting and intercepting or impeding weapons of mass destruction or materials of mass destruction over there, wherever there might be. It might be Pakistan, it might be Yemen, it might be someplace. So at least a great deal of effort needs to be and is being devoted to that task. In addition, of course, getting the materials from over there to here, that's the transportation problem, as is the case, the recent case of the airliners leaving Yemen with the goods.
Over the past few years, the fear of terrorists acquiring weapons-grade material has become very real and something that our government, in partnership with several other countries, has been adamantly working to prevent.
Well, you both have the State Department, you have the Defense Department, and you have the Energy Department. Together, they are working on the nuclear terrorism threat. I know best the efforts that are being done in the State Department, having worked there. And so there you have a lot of efforts that are multinational in nature. And so you have efforts through the International Atomic Energy Agency, in particular through the Security Council, where we're really working on getting states to try to secure their materials and to work together, not in a punitive fashion, but in a cooperative fashion to help other states secure their materials and to have requirements through the Security Council to do so.
Over half of the world's supply of nuclear material is stored in facilities that are defended by nothing more than a chain-link fence and one guard. The U.S. government has been focusing its efforts through various cooperative threat reduction programs on securing the largely unprotected stockpiles in the former Soviet Union and has been successful. But as we've seen today, the most severe threat may not lie there. With a war raging on its neighboring border and an increasing number of suicide attacks rocking their major cities, Pakistan represents one of the world's most troubling states in crisis. Can the military stop al-Qaeda and the Taliban? Can the Pakistani government retain control over its people? In recent years, many new terrorist groups have emerged, several existing groups have reconstituted themselves, and a new batch of militants have appeared that are more violent and less conducive to political solutions than their predecessors. A failed bombing attempt in New York's Times Square in May 2010 was linked to Pakistan. This most recent terrorist attempt exposes the growing ambitions of many of these groups to attack the United States. As concerns for the country's security are rising, the fact remains that Pakistan is the United States' true nuclear nightmare, and the need to secure their nuclear facilities, urge them to comply with IAEA inspections, and continue the fight against terrorist factions in Pakistan should be the U.S. first priority in its efforts to combat the threat of nuclear terrorism.